Hello, today we are continuing on with our color pencil technique chart. Part one of the video, we drew out everything, and then just a moment ago, students grabbed supplies so that we can do the colorful part next. Students followed directions carefully and are going to keep organized these supplies so they do not mix together. We carefully chose Crayola or student grade pencils, and then for the first part, out of the pencil boxes in the center of the room. Behind me, my desk, I have tins of Prismacolor pencils. And students grabbed two contrasting colors of that and a colorless colored pencil. And I'm sorry, I meant to say that up here, students grabbed two contrasting colors and a white Crayola pencil. If you need to share any of these at your table, don't worry, that's fine. And then the last thing students grabbed for the third row are two contrasting watercolor pencils. Again, I might need you guys to share with your table if I don't have enough for everyone to have two. So this is what your technique chart is going to look like at the very end. First thing you notice probably is that this bottom row, we're skipping the burnishing section. So you can take just a gray or a graphite pencil and you can shade in this box right here underneath the burnishing column because that technique does not apply to watercolor pencils. So we'll do that right away before we get started. Now another thing that students have at their table, I had one person grab a tiny bit of water to put in a jar, a paper towel, and one or two paintbrushes to share at their table just to activate our watercolor pencil later on. We don't need everyone to have their own paintbrush because it's just a quick little exercise. But I'm going to put the water and paintbrush and the paper towel aside so that we can focus on just using our colored pencil techniques first. I'm going to put the Prismacolor pencils aside and also the watercolor pencils aside because we are going to be using only our 3 Crayola or student grade brand pencils for the top row. So I'm going to start out with the lighter color. If you have a lighter color, that might work. And we're going to compare just the pressure and feel how it is a little bit denser of a material. So I'm going to do just like what we've done with other materials. Start in the top left corner. I'm going to press hard with this Crayola brand student grade pencil. And you'll feel that if you go over it a few times, it kind of becomes nice and bold. But as you lift, less pressure, it becomes a little grainy and then reveals the white of the paper even further. You can create a nice smooth transition if you go over it a few times. Sometimes it's a little scratchy, but still works well with control. And we're going to do the same thing in the next box. This little box here. But I want to show you how it feels when you put that. Sometimes it's complementary color works best, and I happen to have that. If you just have a contrasting color, you can just see what it looks like when it goes over top. Sometimes it goes over top and it blends okay. Creates sometimes a neutral depending on what color you chose, but that's just a little bit in the corner here just to see what happens. But having control of pressure is good practice here. Now for blending with student grade color pencil, you are only going to be using these two colors. So what we're going to do is we're going to start out with our first color, and we're going to start on the left side, and we're going to do the same thing that we did. We're going to press hard, and then we're going to kind of lift to medium pressure to the middle. So I pressed hard on the outside and then to medium pressure in the middle. With the second color, you're going to start at the other end and you're going to press really hard, but not break it. Just put some pressure on it. And then go to medium pressure once it starts overlapping with another color. So our goal is to make a smooth gradient from one color blending to the next. Now to do this blending term or technique, you have just two colors and you want to go back and forth. You can change the direction of what you're doing to blend it, and you overlap those colors to transition. But you're only using two colors or three colors, typically two, to make that transition. Notice how I'm swapping back and forth, playing around with pressure in different areas, making that gradient. So that is considered blending with just those two colors. Now burnishing, some of you guys have seen a white color pencil in your sets before and may not know, but this is for burnishing techniques. So in this section right here, we're going to do the same thing to start. With our first color, we're going to start the left side, putting some pressure down. You're going to go to the right gradually and lift to about medium pressure and stop halfway through that rectangle. Taking that second color, we're going to start at the other end, putting a decent amount of pressure on it, gradually going towards the center, medium pressure at that point to overlap those colors. Now, burnishing though is when you use that white colored pencil as a blender, which not to confuse you for the blending term there, but you're going to burnish with that white colored pencil. And I want you to notice that when you go back and forth in a different direction with white, you put a fair amount of pressure on it. It softens that color. It does lighten it a little bit because of the white pigment in there, but it can be used, and it kind of gives it like a glossy, reflective look if you really put some pressure and build up those layers, okay? So that's burnishing. You can do that anytime. Very often students think that they're done when they have a grainy finish to it, but believe it or not, you can really have a beautiful effect when you layer, and burnish or blend. It can be a lot more bold in color. Now with our student grade pencils, we are just going to test out some mark making. Remember, the speed of your mark making can impact the look of quality of line. Maybe you do some stippling. Notice how I'm changing my grip a little bit. Not smashing the tip of my pencil, but using it for that speckling. And you can always do a little scribbling and layering of scribbling over top different colors. This is just a reminder that changing your grip is always an option, okay? And your technique and mark making. Putting your student grade pencils now to the side. We are going to feel the difference in our second row with our Prismacolor pencils. So students have two contrasting colors. I happen to have two contrasting complementary colors and a colorless colored pencil. If you need to share this colorless colored pencil with a neighbor, please do. And I'm going to start out with my lighter orange or lighter color again. And we're going to feel the difference in this box here, testing out that pressure. You're going to feel that it already, when you press down, it glides a little nicer over the paper. And as you lift, it still kind of has that grainy finish to it when it's lightly touching the paper. But it sometimes sticks to the paper a little better. Doing the same thing in the next box, starting at the top left corner. Fair amount of pressure, building up that layer. Lift, as we go down to the bottom right corner. And I'm going to show you, I use similar colors. I know not all of you did for your first row and your second row, but for Crayola brand, I used orange and blue. And I layered just a little bit of blue over top student grade orange, okay? Notice how I'm using blue Prismacolor over orange and how much bolder and stickier that is to my orange. So your contrasting color, whatever one you chose, you can see how they layer really, really nicely, the artist grade Prismacolor. And you can go over top of that first color, and it just is really nice transition there, okay? Now, in this second column, we're going to do blending, which requires just those two colors again. We're going to do the same thing we did above with student grade. Starting with that first color on the left side, I'm going to press, 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 not breaking the tip, just a little bit of pressure, lifting slowly towards the center as I go to the right, stopping about halfway, taking my other color, starting at the right side, pressure, not crunching the tip, but pressure, 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 then shifting to medium pressure and overlapping in the center. So blending is with just two colors, and I'm going to now use my original color, and I'm going to use that side to side to transition that layer. Making a gradient from my first color is orange to blue, and you're going to feel and see how much bolder that blending is with Prismacolor. It's still, I mean, it's a slight difference, but can have a really nice effect. You can have push and pull those colors a little easier. And again, it has a nice little finish, glossy finish to it if you do it at the right pressure. Okay? In this third column here, again, we are doing burnishing. We're going to do our first color, our second color, and we are going to blend. This time you're going to test out what a colorless color pencil does. So, starting out on the left side with my first color, putting a fair amount of pressure on it, going towards the right, stopping in the center. With the second color, starting at the other end, fair amount of pressure to medium pressure as it overlaps my first color. But this time, not using these colors again, I'm going to use just my colorless pencil, and I'm going to go side to side. And you're going to see you can use this as a almost like a blending stump, but just for colored pencils. It pushes and it picks up some pigment, pushes and pulls it. Go in little circles. And combine it if you need to go back and use your other colors to layer, layer, layer. Change the direction to make it all velvety. That's an option too. Now, you'll notice that some people like to use white Prismacolor. It just tints it like it did up here. This is colorless. You'll see how it did not tint it or make it lighter. So this is just an option. You can use a white Prismacolor as well. Just be aware that white pigment might lighten your colors. And finally, this box here with Prismacolor still, we are just going to do a little bit of mark making. Just a reminder that we can change our grip, change our technique to have different effects, like scribbling, hatching, cross hatching, quality of line, and stippling. So we use these three Prismacolors for row 2. We are now going to put these to the side. The last row is our watercolor pencil. This won't take us very long. We're just going to start out with one of our colors. I'm going to use the lighter color. For me, it's this light green. And you're going to feel the pressure in this first box here, just like what we did above, and it feels like a normal colored pencil. Lifting, lifting, lifting. You can create that gradient. Same thing in the second box with that first color. Putting a fair amount of pressure. Lifting, lifting, lifting. And you'll feel it's a little denser, kind of like it feels the texture of student grade a little bit. And I'm using my second color just to layer and see how it's a little sharper, scratchier to start. If you can see that, it's a little scratchier, not as grainy. Okay. And you can still blend colors, but I'm going to show you it's a little different. Blending can happen by overlapping colors like we did with student grade. But I'm going to start with this first color on the left. I'm going to go about halfway, straight up and down, and then take a second color on the other end, and I'm going to meet it in the middle. Now, watercolor pencils, again, they feel the texture of student grade colored pencils, but they have that water-soluble binding agent. So now you can take turns and you can dip the tip of your watercolor or of a paintbrush in water. Don't make it drip. Blot it if you need to. You want to have control, and you can blend your colors together side to side or in little circles to create a gradient. So all of that pigment, and I know I'm using the Mongol brand. That seems to be a pretty good one. Some of you have Sargent brand. Some of you have a couple other different brands because my watercolor pencil drawer has a variety. Some brands, to be honest, blend a little better than others. So if yours is kind of stubborn right now, don't worry. But you can see how that can be softened and turned into watercolor. So the last box here, this is just us using different mark making, different textures, different quality of line like we did above. But you're going to see that no matter what you do, you can add a little bit of water and soften it. And all of it bleeds together. And some people like to even dampen their paper and use it again over top lightly. It does get soggy, so you don't want to press down too hard, but you can have damp paper and then use the colored pencil, watercolor pencil again over top, which is fun. So you have a taster now of watercolor pencils, Prismacolor pencils, and Crayola student grade. So that is all for this exercise. I want you guys all, once you are done with this, make sure you put Crayola back in the pencil boxes that belong in the center of the room. Mongol or watercolor pencils back in the watercolor pencil drawer, and Prismacolors in the tins behind my desk. Thank you.